Hello, everybody. I would like to welcome you all to this first kickoff of the debates that Nova Debate will organize around the topic of the future of education. And our first guest today is the Dean of Nova SBE, Professor Daniel Traça, that we welcome here today to talk a bit about what will be the perspectives about the years to come, the next decade or the next 5 years, about the future of education. We would like to thank you for accepting our invitation, and we'd like to thank you all for being here today with us. If you wish to make any question to the professor, you can just leave it on the comments of the Facebook Live, and then I will make the question to Professor Daniel. So first of all, and once again, thank you for coming. I would like to ask you, to try to discuss the future of education or to discuss education in general. I would like to try to make a division surrounding what is the before the university and the coming to the university, the moments in the university and after the university. So to start, I would like to know your opinion on the current financing system of the university. So we hear a lot about the tuition fees that undergraduates pay. In your opinion, does it make sense in current days for universities to still continue to ask for the tuition fees to the undergraduates?
Hi, I'd like to say hello to everybody that is possibly watching us wherever they are. That only a few students that go to certain universities are the ones that are going to get the higher income and are the ones that are going to get the higher benefits when they come out of it. And so when you bring these two things together, which is on one hand, making sure that everybody has access, on the other hand, making sure that you don't make everybody pay when some students are going to benefit much more than others, the way to secure this is to have a hybrid system, which is a little bit of what we have, where part of it, the government intervenes and intervenes heavily to make sure that people have access. And in particular, making sure that, for example, students that are under more difficult situations have a lot of support that allows them to go to the university they want to go to in the city where they need to go to. That's one level. So the government supports all those that need and allows them to go to the university that they can go to. But at the same time, when you have students that are going to go to university and because of that are going to get much higher income later on, that those students pay for the investment they're going to want to do in order for the higher income they want to get in the end. I hope I'm being clear, but let me give you a few examples to make this very clear. In the UK now, the system is such where if you want to go to a university that is slightly more expensive, you can actually borrow it from your future, and you can actually, basically, the university is paid for, but what happens is once you graduate in your future, you pay higher taxes because you have benefited from the university, okay? What this means is that if you actually go to university and because of that, you're gonna make more money in the future, then you take some of that money, that extra money that you're going to make in the future, and you use it to pay back to pay back to your university. And I think I think the system has to be such where, again, the main goals are that everybody that has an opportunity of going to university can go regardless of what their income is, regardless of what their background is, regardless of what their family makes. And this means supporting intuition, but not only supporting intuition, it means also supporting in livelihood. Sometimes tuition is very inexpensive, but families cannot afford the fact that you have to go to another city and you have to pay for a place to live. So all those costs need to be supported for the families that need it. And the government should be very effective in making sure that this happens. But at the same time, afterwards, when people that benefit from education get a higher income later on, they should be able to pay the cost of their education because it basically allowed them individually to benefit from that higher income. So I think the system, the way, for example, is being used in the UK, or the system, the way some institutions are doing it now in Portugal, where it allows you to pay for the higher value of education using the higher income that you're going to have in the future is a fairer system than basically making sure that taxpayers across the board pay. If you basically make taxpayers pay for everything, what you'll have is that families whose kids cannot go to university are basically paying for the education of students who are going to university and who are going to have a much higher income in the future. I hope I was clear. If not, then feel free to ask questions for clarification.
Yeah, so we first talked about the financing system, and now I would like to go and move to the university admissions in the current model as they exist right now. So basically, a student to go to Nova, either to study economics or to study business, basically what will count at the end, it will be their high school GPA plus the grade that we'll have on the final exam of math. Do the professors think that this model should still keep going, or you think that there should be some sort of change, and for example the university should have their specific exams and recruitment processes for the students?
That's a very difficult question. I think in this world where you can see that the kinds of skills that are important for the future are changing dramatically, I don't think that the skills that you measure by being a good student in your high school with a good GPA are enough to define the competencies of anybody. You can be a wonderful student, have a wonderful GPA, and yet many other things will matter to define you and to make you and to define your value for any university. And in that sense, I think it would be interesting to allow schools, universities, more space to define who they admit, for two reasons. Again, first, because I think many of the criteria that are relevant cannot be measured simply by the GPA that you have out of your secondary school. Second, because I think each university has a profile of students, and that profile of students varies a lot. And so universities should have the ability of choosing according to those profiles. However, I think that what happens in Portugal is that people don't trust institutions a lot. And the system that works in Portugal, which you've described, it's a system that may not be perfect, but it's a system that is very is very lobby-proof in a sense. You see, it's very direct, it's very automatic. It may not be perfect, but we know that whatever is defined is what comes out of it. And I think that's the challenge in Portugal. I think that if universities should be given the opportunity of experimenting with systems that are quite more modern and quite more flexible in the kinds of competencies, in the kinds of criteria they would like to use to accept candidates. I would love, for example, to look at when I accept candidates, and we do this in the masters because there's more flexibility, but I would also like to do it in the bachelor program. When I accept candidates, I'd like not just to accept candidates that have a very high GPA because they've been very good students doing exams, but candidates that have done other initiatives, such as, for example, in their own high school, organizing a debate club, organizing events, creating opportunities for their colleagues. These are all things that I would like to use as criteria to admit students to Nova SBE, for example. I'm not able to do this. I would like to have that freedom. And I would like, many times we don't live by those rules, people still feel that having a system like this, which is a system that we know it may not be perfect, but we also know that nobody interfered in it. I think some people still feel that the system it works better this way. And I think that's the trade-off that exists in Portugal. I do think, however, that going forward, as we see the kinds of skills that are more relevant and more relevant towards the future, we are going to need to have more discretion and other opportunities of bringing those competencies, such, for example, what else you have done outside of the classroom, bringing those criteria into the process of admitting into universities. Because the problem is not just the way students are admitted. The problem is what the implications of this. If I tell students that they're only admitted because they have a good GPA in a given set of courses, what I'm going to see is that in high school, students are only going to spend time in those aspects. So a student that, for example, would like to, when he or she is in high school, to volunteer, to organize activities for other students, to create a Nova debate club in a high school, is going to say, no, I'm not going to do this because doing this does not make me get into university, right? So the problem is even more serious because it's not just about who gets into university, it's what we encourage, the kinds of skills that we encourage students in secondary school to develop. And I think that's the biggest problem. So in essence, I think that we need to create other criteria. I understand that people sometimes get suspicious of giving more autonomy to universities, but I think sooner or later we're going to have to get there, because I think that in the future, these other competencies are the ones that are more important.
We just received a question from one of our students called Pedro Leal that asked about the difference in Nova SBE regarding the tuition fees of masters and bachelors. He just basically asks why the difference is so big, and he gives the example of Technic, which he says that the tuition fees of both courses are basically the same.
Well, what happens in Nova is that we have, first of all, we compete in an international setting, okay? And second, we get, if you look at the kinds of support that we get in terms of our budget from the government, it's a much lower level of support, right? And so in order for us to grow, so for example, if we wanted to have just the number, if we wanted to survive only based on the money coming from the government, we would be able to accept only a small number of students, right? In order for us to accept more and more students, because these extra students are not covered by the budget, because the budget that we receive from the government doesn't grow with the number of students, as we grow and more students, we need to basically charge higher tuition, because at the margin, the budget from the government doesn't grow. Is this clear?
Yeah.
I'm using you as a guidance, okay? And that is the basic problem. Now you may of course say, oh, but then why does Nova grow? Why doesn't Nova simply stay with a few students in their master's program and use the budget from the government to subsidize those students, to pay for the cost of those students? Well, what happens is, if you really want to have a strong school internationally, if you really want have a school of business and economics that is relevant internationally, where you have the international companies coming to hire, you need to have a large school. A small school will find it very hard to have all these international companies coming to hire, not just the foreign students, but also our own Portuguese students. And we believe that in this world, if you want to play with the big guys, if you want to be a school that is relevant internationally, you need to be able to attract these international companies. In order to attract those international companies, you need to be big. In order for you to be big, you need to grow. And in order for you to grow, because we cannot expect the government to increase the subsidies as we grow, we need to make sure that students support a higher proportion of the total cost of the operation. And that basically explains why, when you look at in terms of the masters, as we grow and grow, we need to make sure that we rely less on government budget, and therefore the students need to pay the real cost, a higher proportion of the real cost of the education they receive.
Okay.
Is this making sense?
Yeah, basically the fact that there are finite resources given by the government will basically imply that Nova, to have a bigger size, to be able to capture the attention of the players around, we'll have to have more master students, and we'll have to have a bigger dimension. Yeah.
And again, those master students, because the government budget is not subsidizing them, they're going to have to cover the real cost of their education.
Yeah. So right now, going to the at the moment status.
I hope the gentleman that I don't know if he was a man or a woman that asked the question. I hope that he or she became clear.
Yeah. Okay, so moving at the moment status, with all the fuss regarding COVID-19 and all the changes that implied the transition to the digital and to the technological platforms, do you think that this epidemics kind of was the triggering point and that there's no coming back?
I think this academics will in education will change a few things. I think we had seen already there were trends around the world where digital was fundamentally affecting education. By fundamentally affecting, I mean digital meant a different form of education. I think universities in general are institutions that are very resistant to change. It's been like this since centuries, since universities exist. But I do think that what this crisis has brought about is this idea, okay, here's digital, let's use it. Because by the way, it really helps our life over the near and this year and next year. And I think what you will see is exactly this, that universities will go into two spaces. One is universities that will continue to resist the change, and those will stay behind. And then there are universities that are going to use this crisis to accelerate that change. And I think the ones that use this crisis to accelerate change in the future are going to get out of hand, and that's what we want to do. I mean, just next year, for example, we're going to have a severe problem in our school. Given if you look at social distancing, the number of students you can put in each class will fundamentally reduce. And we simply cannot afford just repeating all these things. So we're trying to think of how we can actually leverage it. We understand that whatever education you get on campus is fundamental. That's why we built this campus. Live on campus, education on campus, it matters a lot. But at the same time, maybe there are some parts of what we do that can be done more effectively with support of digital. This is what we're doing now. This is what we're reflecting on now.
Yeah. And do you think that the situation kind of anticipated the changes that were going to happen on the years to come, or these changes wouldn't come at all if there wasn't this?
No, I think these changes would have come. I think absolutely these changes were here. They would have come. They would have come at a much lower pace. I don't think that anything that comes out of this crisis will be different from what it would have been otherwise. Let's say not of course for the next 2 years, okay? But once the crisis goes away, and it will go away, I don't think that anything that's going to happen is something that would not have happened. What will have happened is that many changes will have accelerated because of the crisis.
Okay, so thinking also this question of the digital transition and the use of technologies in the learning process, some people say and that we are living in the fourth revolution, industrial revolution, in the sense that we will have artificial intelligence and all of that going around, which will put a higher stress in courses like engineering or science. So do you think that in the years to come we'll have, and Nova is also working on that with the new master program that we'll have, do you think that in the years to come we'll have a sort of a mutant between computer engineers / economists or businesswomen or businessmen?
I fundamentally believe that. And that's why we're fundamentally changing what we do at Nova SB. Let me be very clear. We have, the way the world is going in terms of the kinds of skills that are going to be necessary is actually a two-way street. One, technology is going to be all over the place. So right now, for example, for you to work with Excel is almost like reading and writing, okay? It will be like this with AI. It will be like this with technology in general in the future. If you don't understand what these concepts are, if you go into an organization and cannot master these things, that's going to be basics. And as time goes by, right now, for example, programming is still a major skill. In 5 years, it's going to be like doing Excel. Yeah. Okay. When that happens, what will happen is that machines will do a lot of the quantitative stuff, right? I mean, 10 years ago, if you were very good at doing calculus, you would have been very successful. But then, of course, calculators came, Excel came, and you're not good at what you have to do is be able to operate Excel and to turn. And the key skill is, can you transform your questions into an Excel question that you can get Excel to answer that for you? Okay. And the other skills that are important is, can you be creative in the way, so Excel does the calculations, can you be creative in the way you do other things? I think we're going to go more and more in that direction. What this means is that you are going to have to be able to, on some level, understand technology very broadly, data, all those things very broadly, and because a lot of those things are going to be done by machines, you're going to have to become more human in the way you collaborate, in the way you innovate, in the way you manage projects, in the way you create. Then those things become even more important. And that's basically the way we're changing our curriculum. We're changing our curriculum in the sense that we give a lot more technical stuff, but we also know that in the future, 5 years from now, what's going to make you very successful is not that you're a cruncher. We're never going to be like engineers. What we need to do as people that study business and economics is we need to go into an organization, have the engineers on one side, and transform you and be able to convert the language of business, the language of the things that happen in your company, the language of making people work together, and translating that language into the engineers so that they can make the operations work in ways that are effective. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, instead
and
of
this is a whole new set of skills. And so yes, at Nova, what we're doing is two things. If you look at our math and business analytics, we're saying we're not here to compete with engineering schools. We're not here to teach people to crunch numbers over and over again. No, that's not what we do. But we're here to create people that when they go to a company, they can speak to someone in marketing and they can turn over to the engineer and make sure that that engineer is crunching in a way that helps the marketeer solve his or her problem. Someone that when he's speaking to the people in the finance department can speak to the people in finance, can understand finance, but then can turn into the engineer and say, okay, this is the problem. Let's just come up with some platform or some data system or some AI system that helps me solve the problem of the company. This role of translators, this ability of translating between technology and management, between technology and economics, between data and management, between data and economics, is where I think the Nova ASB students will position themselves. And it is the unique sweet spot where I think the difference is going to be made in the future. Is bringing people, is bringing institutions, is bringing knowledge together to solve problems. And then the way we've done our business analytics is this, and this is why it's very different from any other master's that is around. We don't teach you to crunch. This you can go into an engineering school. We teach you to understand crunching data so that we go into a company and help that company be better managed using these tools.
Okay, and that sort of translation work has also a bit to do with the soft skills in the way that we have to communicate with the different departments and be able to figure out a way to communicate between them using kind of a common language or to adapt the language to each department. And I was thinking the other day about this, and I asked
look, let me make one point. It's more than this. It's when you, for example, go into a company and you're going to have someone that comes from marketing, that comes from the creative industries, and someone that comes from finance, that comes with a very strong math background, and someone that is coming from legal, who has a law background. How can you manage a team that takes all these different people together to create a solution to a problem and translate whatever comes out of their minds into something where technology is providing a solution? So the translator is basically the cornerstone that is going to make different people work together. And we know that this is what business is about. It's about making people work together. And so this is really where we're trying to convert our curricula to make you ready to play that role.
Yeah, I was talking the other day with a friend, and he asked me if in the future we will have kind of schools will abandon courses like finance, and they will put a higher stress on courses like marketing or human resources and have, for example, Nova SBE, would it be feasible for Nova SBE to just quit the finance masters and start making masters in marketing or in human resources as this adaptation to the future?
Okay, I don't think finance will go away. If anything, finance is becoming more and more important. Now, finance, of course, will have to go through an adjustment, and it is now going through an adjustment. I think, for example, when you see the pressure that you have on companies to not just provide a bottom line, but to then be sustainable, to provide an ESG, an environmental, sustainable, and governance backgrounds, finance is going to also start entering those fields. Right? So finance, in the end, is not just going to be about the crunching; it's also going to be about the about all the dimensions of the performance of organizations, and you're going to see that. So finance will, of course, adjust. I mean, by the way, sustainable finance, which is a course that we're going to be launching very soon at the school, I think maybe even this year, is coming. It's coming really big time, right? But that's also finance, right? So finance will have to adapt to this new world. It will not disappear. Now, a different question is, could Nova think of doing masters that are more specific? We are offering now a master's in business analytics. That's specific. And we will be offering, we are asking for accreditation for 2 new masters, one master in public policy and international development, and one master's in innovation and entrepreneurship. So we are starting to offer a few masters that are more specific. That's different. That's basically, I think that what happens is, when you look at the world, we are more and more going to have people changing careers all the time. So today you're a marketeer, tomorrow you're working in consumer behavior, the day after you're working on the operation side of the business, and then tomorrow you're working on another industry that's completely different. And that's why what we have done is to give you a master's in management that is very broad, that allows you to be a manager in a very broad sense, where you learn strategy, you learn marketing, and then allow you to specialize. I think it's the best way to go forward, because what allows you to do is say, okay, you guys are very young when you do your master's, and you decide, I want to do a master's in marketing. What happens if you make a mistake? What if you come to the conclusion that, oh, in the end, I don't really like marketing that much. I would like to do strategy, right? And then, we're going to start a whole new master's in strategy. Makes no sense. So by doing a master's in management, which allows you then to choose a major, it gives you much more flexibility and freedom, which is something that I think we should cherish these days. People who are going to change careers many, many times are going to, either by choice or because life is going to make them change careers. And by having a master in management with the possibility of doing a major, it allows you to basically balance this and creates you a space of more freedom, of more flexibility, which I think is better for a person of your age planning a career. If you are doing this, let's say later on, if you're doing a professional master's, if you're 35 years old, you know exactly what you want to do, then it may make sense to do a more tailored master's. I think it does make sense to do that when we're doing it at the age that you guys do your master's, your pre-experience master's.
Okay. And the thing that we have to do this sort of compatibilization between all the areas of the company and all this sort of courses and areas of interest leads me to another question, which is the fact that we are going through a world that basically put a lot of stress on the theoretical formulas and etc. And it's going to be even more pragmatic and more about the practical stuff. And it will be kind of learning by doing. And does that mean that there is a global trend of having more stress on the business and less on economics, in a way that businessmen and CEOs of the companies, the one that direct the company, have higher responsibilities and are more adaptable to the new trends and mainstreams that the economists?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think there are two questions that you're putting there, and they have two different answers. So economics versus business. I think we are living in a world where the problems are becoming more systemic than they used to be. What I'm saying is you look at the problems that business has today, and many of them are the problems of society. I mean, how much is inequality going to create problems in the political system? How do I deal with the problems of sustainability? How do I deal with the consequences of technology? And in a sense, the manager, the CEO, is increasingly becoming not just the head of the company, but a citizen of the world with responsibilities at the global level, because the systems are failing. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it makes a lot of sense that when you are a CEO, when you're a top level manager, you need not just to understand, oh, this is my little corner here, this is my company, but you need to understand the system. And economics, in a sense, allows you to understand the system better. One of the issues that we're doing, and when we're deciding to review our curriculum for the bachelor, we're increasing the role of history, because I think history allows you to understand systems better. Right? And so at that level, I think that we're having less and less of the CEO or of the manager who's stuck in his own little room doing his own little thing, because he can do his own little thing, but listen, the system outside is failing, it's collapsing, and he may do his own little things very well, but in the end, it's not going to happen because the system outside is collapsing. Your room may be wonderful, but if your building is crumbling down, you better be aware of what's happening to the building. Right? And so, in a sense, I don't think that this notion of I'm now a manager and I don't care about the economy, I don't care about economics, I don't care about history, has to go away. And by the way, the system is not only crumbling, but you can see more and more people are expecting business leaders to play a role. People more and more, they know that it's not just the government that's going to fix it. It's not just the president of the United States or the president of Europe or the international institutions. It's the business leaders that have to contribute to that solution. So not only is the system crumbling, and so you cannot be in your room, but by the way, people are telling you, you have to help us keep the building, make the building more stronger. Right? So we need managers now that are not just crunchers, that are not just taking micro decisions, but that understand systems, they understand the macro of it. Okay? And in that sense, I think economics is more relevant than what it used to be in the past. Now, another thing is practice versus theory. There, I think what is happening is that because the system outside has many issues, and it's very new, the impact of technology, the issues of sustainability, all these are very new issues, the issues of globalization, all these are very new issues. And these are issues for which we don't have good theories for. One of the problems of these days, the reason why people fight so much, is that we don't have good theories for many of the things that we're living today, simply because we never went through this in the past. Right? And so I think that what the implication of this is not that you should start focusing on your little corner. The implication is that you should be more humble with theory. You should have a stronger sense of humility. You should say, I'm not sure I understand this completely, so I will try a new solution and see if it works. And this you can only do by testing, by doing things. Let me give you an example. Let's think of the example of this crisis of COVID. We could say, I know everything about pandemics. I know everything about pandemics. Let's do this, this, and that. But we don't. So how are we doing this? We're opening slowly. Today we open something, we see if it works. Tomorrow we open something, we see if it works. And then slowly, in order not to make mistakes, we start learning how you cope with this. It's the same thing nowadays in everything that we do. It's not just the pandemic that we don't understand a lot. It's a lot of the things, a lot of international relations, war and peace, the oil crisis, sustainability, global change, global climate change. These are all things that we don't completely understand. Technology, data protection. These are all things that we don't really understand. And so when we are managing, when we take decisions in our company, we need to have that humility of actually testing. And this is why it's so important that you guys learn to do things. Not just the theory, but that you have projects, that you develop projects, because those projects help you to deal with a situation where you don't know everything. Entrepreneurship, for example. Entrepreneurship is something that for me is very important. I would like you guys to start something, a project, a business, something. Not because I think you're going to be entrepreneurs, but because when you start a business, when you do a project like this, you have to take decisions in a context where you don't know everything. And you do a little bit, you try, you run the risk, you take decisions. These skills are more and more important these days Because unlike in the past, where we knew we could predict the world, we are no longer able to predict the world. And when you cannot predict the world, you need to bootstrap. You need to try something new. You need to take decisions, run risks, and then fix it afterwards. And those are the new skills that I was talking about before. And these new skills, you don't get them only in the classroom, you get them by doing stuff. And so the learning by doing is the learning by trying. And that is something that, so this is different from the economics versus business thing, this discussion. This is a discussion of actually taking theory at face value, or actually being more humble and trying out things before you actually just assume that you know everything.
Yeah. In your intervention, you just recognize the fact that basically managers have to consider themselves because they are citizens of the world that are all interconnected, not only with the areas of the company, of the core of the company, but also with the system and with the world. And also with the political decisions that go through the legislative or executive roles, have also a lot of interactions with the companies. Do you think that the learning of economics/business should be set aside totally from politics? Or if we are doing business, if we are doing economics, there is no way to run we cannot talk about it without mentioning politics or without going to the politic world?
No, I think that nowadays everything is connected. I think that we need to understand science. We need to understand politics. We need to understand economics and business. We need to understand everything together in order for you to be a good manager and to be a good citizen, by the way. I think but by the way, when you think of these sciences, I think that a lot of these sciences are not very advanced. And many of these sciences have theories, but the world is changing faster than the ability of these sciences to keep up with the world. And I think that's why I think history is very important. I think we need to understand history because we need to understand how the evolution of human beings works by facts, by knowledge, by insights, and not simply because a thinker does a theory, and then that theory explains the world. That's not the way human societies evolve. They evolve by fact. They evolve through the joint forces of science, of politics, of thinking, of knowledge, of ideas, and politics, ideas, and science always mesh around. And it's history that makes you understand this concept. And nowadays, because the world is changing so fast that the theories cannot keep up with it, history is a much better place to learn. It's because you can see because history deals with something that theories cannot deal with. Most theories, I mean, if you're studying, you're in business or in economics?
Economics.
Lucas, which one is the course?
I'm studying economics.
Economics.
Yeah.
Because you study economics. But when you have economics or any other science, you do a lot of simplification of the world. But the world is not simple. The world is very, very complex. Simplification allows you to understand it.
Yeah, and to try to model it. But
when you have so much change happening at the same time, complexity kicks in, right? And only history allows you to live through complexity. And we are now in a world of massive complexity. Too many things are changing at the same time. And so a lot of these theories all of a sudden get out of date. History allows you to understand complexity. And that's very important nowadays.
Okay, and with all this mix of theories that goes around the academic world and the clash of theories between them, how do you think that is nowadays, the freedom of speech in the academic communities in general?
I think that's something that we have acquired. I think it's very there. People are free to speak. Now, another question is that the academic world, I'm not sure, is free to listen. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's one thing I can say whatever I want, and everybody can say whatever they want. But it is true that the academic world is relatively stiff in their ears. They prefer to listen to people that speak that think like them, right? And I think that slows down the process of change in many of the academic world and among sciences. But that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. I think also there you'll see a lot of changes. One of the things, for example, that we've done at Nova, we've created these knowledge centers, which are now engaging with many students. These knowledge centers is an opportunity of bringing science into the day-to-day issue, into real impact, hoping that when actually science gets closer to real life, it starts changing faster, it starts adjusting to impact faster. And that's also something we want to try to create at Nova with these knowledge centers, which have been very successful.
Okay. And now for a final question about Portugal in specific. For example, Nova SP has a lot of international students. The teaching of Nova, it's mainly in English, so it's basically preparing us for an international career. We have a lot of good universities in Portugal. Most of the students, not all, then they go to other countries when they finish either their bachelor's or their master's. Do you think that Portuguese universities are becoming mostly a sort of exporters of knowledge to the world, and not to Portugal, because the students don't remain in Portugal?
That's a good question. I think many students will remain in Portugal. I mean, for example, German students that come, most of them don't stay because of language, but many of the Italian students that come to study at Nova do decide to stay in Portugal. And I think what we want also to try to bring is students from other countries that will decide to stay in Portugal. We're really committed to making that happen, because that's a key contribution that we're going to have to the Portuguese economy. I also think that these Portuguese students that are educated in this more international environment are going to become better professionals. And so when they go to the Portuguese companies, they're going to contribute more to the internationalization and the success of these Portuguese companies. Above all, I think that in a country like Portugal, the only way for us to be relevant is to be completely open, to be a place where people come in, people go away, people come back. I do think that, for example, many of the Portuguese that will have gone abroad to work or to study, many of them are going to come back. I would bet that 50% of them will come back, and they will come back with an opportunity of creating a lot of value for Portugal, international contacts, new skills to create companies. All this is going to be very important. Let me give you an example. In India, when India went through this second wave of liberalization that is now generating all these growth, when you have companies like Wipro or other Indian companies that have become very strong, many of them were Indians that had migrated abroad, that decided to come back and to set up these companies in India. I think that if we do a good job of doing the basics, creating an open economy, ensuring that there's funding, making it easier to start businesses, what you will see is that a lot of these Portuguese that have gone abroad for Nova and other places will come back with more knowledge, with more networks, with more initiative, and they will actually support the development of the Portuguese economy. And so I don't think that if Portugal has an approach that says, oh, whatever we do here is isolated from the rest, we're going to get ahead. We are too small, too away from the center of Europe to think that we can, on top of all that natural distance, we can create artificial distances that prevent us from moving around. We're just going to be at the corner like we were 40 years ago. It's because we have opened up that I think the country has developed, and we should continue to open up. Now, of course, some companies are going to survive, companies are going to die, some schools are going to survive, some schools are going to die. But there is no way in today's economy that Portugal will grow without enmeshing itself completely from the point of view of human resources, from the point of view of human strategy, from enmeshing itself completely into the European landscape.
Okay. From a personal perspective, do you see the future with optimism, even with all the fuss around coronavirus, or this kind of punch the expectations that you had previously about the future?
I see the future with optimism. I see the future with optimism for the school. I see the future with lots of optimism for the country. I even see the future with lots of optimism for Europe, because I think we've had some good news recently where you may have a solution. You know, crises have this. I mean, crises are either places where you either survive and you get stronger, or you don't survive and you go down with the ship. So I thoroughly see this future with optimism. I don't think that this crisis will fundamentally change things in the future. It will accelerate certain changes, will fundamentally change. When we come out of it, I mean, just imagine right now for Portugal, for the school, if we've done a good process of transition out of COVID, if we do a good process of opening the economy, and this is when the Portuguese are better, is in crisis. When we are in crisis, the Portuguese always overcome themselves, commit, work hard, stop fighting, get together, come up with joint projects. And this is exactly what we're seeing, very much like what we saw during the crisis, the 2011 crisis. And so I think that these crises, if we continue doing what, and we'll have to do more, just continue doing and acting the way we've been acting, I think that as a country, we're going to come out of the crisis stronger than we got in. And as a school also, we're going to come out of the crisis stronger than we actually got in.
Okay. Thank you very much for this 1 hour of conversation. I want to thank for everyone that will then listen to us either in the YouTube or in the Facebook when we will then post the video. Unfortunately, the video just cut the live transmission, so we just basically did it all, but it's recorded and then we will post it. I want to thank for everyone again, and just to say that in 2 days from now, in the 30th of April, we will receive another talk regarding the future of education that will be with Professor Mariana França Gouveia, which is basically the Dean of Nova Nova School of Law. So thank you for listening to us, and thank you, Professor, again for this conversation. Thank you.